welcome to Fortune Forecast. I am your hostess, Daisy Raisler, and I hope that you've been enjoying this series from Thomas Troward with his Edinburgh lectures on mental science. And in the first video, the first chapter, I gave a little background about Thomas Troward. And as I mentioned, he was an English author whose works influenced the New Thought movement and mystic Christianity. It was said that Thomas was a kind and understanding man by those who knew him well. And it was towards his latter years that he really stepped up his game and produced some of his finest works. So without any further delay, let's get started as we jump into Chapter 3. Again, Chapter 3 from the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science by Thomas Troward. The title is The Unity of the Spirit. We have now paved the way for understanding what is meant by the unity of spirit. In the first conception of spirit as the underlying origin of all things, we see a universal substance which, at this stage, is not differentiated into any specific forms. This is not a question of some bygone time, but subsists at every moment of all time in the innermost nature of all being. And when we see this, we see that the division between one specific form and another has below it a deep essential unity, which acts as the supporter of all the several forms of individuality arising out of it. And as our thought penetrates deeper into the nature of this all-producing spiritual substance, we see that it cannot be limited to any one portion of space, but must be limitless as space itself. And that the idea of any portion of space where it is not is inconceivable. It is one of those intuitive perceptions from which the human mind can never get away, that this primordial, all-generating living spirit must be commensurate with infinitude. And we can therefore never think of it otherwise than as universal or infinite. Now, it is a mathematical truth that the infinite must be a unity. You cannot have two infinites, for then neither would be infinite. Each would be limited by the other. Nor can you split the infinite into fractions. The infinite is mathematically essential unity. This is a point on which too much stress cannot be laid, for there follow from it the most important consequences. Unity, as such, can neither be multiplied nor divided, for either operation destroys the unity. By multiplying, we produce a plurality of units of the same scale as the original. And by dividing, we produce a plurality of units of a smaller scale. And a plurality of units is not unity by multiplicity. Therefore, if we would penetrate below the outward nature of the individual to that innermost principle of this being from which his individuality takes its rise, we can do so only by passing beyond the conception of individual existence into that of the unity of universal being. This may appear to be a merely philosophical abstraction, but the student who would produce practical results must realize that these abstract generalizations are the foundation of the practical work he is going to do. Now, the great fact to be recognized about a unity is that because it is a single unit, wherever it is at all, the whole of it must be. The amount we allow our mind to wander off to the idea of extension in space and say that one part of the unit is here and another there, we have descended from the idea of unity into that of parts or fractions of a single unit, which is to pass into the idea of a multiplicity of smaller units. And in that case, we are dealing with the relative, or the relation subsisting between two or more entities, which are therefore limited by each other, and so have passed out of the region of a simple unity, which is the absolute. It is therefore a mathematical necessity that, because the originating life principle is infinite, it is a single unit, and consequently, wherever it is at all, the whole of it must be present. But because it is infinite or limitless, it is everywhere, and therefore it follows that the whole of spirit must be present at every point in space at the same moment. Spirit is thus omnipresent in its entirety, and it is accordingly logically correct that at every moment of time, all spirit is concentrated at any point in space that we may choose to fix our thought upon. This is the fundamental fact of all being, and it is for this reason that I have prepared the way for it by laying down the relation between spirit and matter, and that between idea and form, on the one hand, the absolute, from which the elements of time and space are timely and entirely absent, and on the other, the relative, which is entirely dependent on those elements. This great fact is that pure spirit continually subsists in the absolute, whether in a corporeal body or not, and from it all the phenomena of being flow, whether on the mental plane or the physical. The knowledge of this fact regarding spirit is the basis of all conscious spiritual operation, and therefore in proportion to our increasing recognition of it, our power of producing outward visible results by the action of our thought will grow. The whole is greater than its part, and therefore, if by our recognition of this unity we can concentrate all spirit into any given point at any moment, we thereby include any individualization of it that we may wish to deal with. The practical importance of this conclusion is too obvious to need enlarging upon. Pure spirit is the life's principle, considered apart from the matrix in which it takes relation to time and space in a particular form. In this aspect, it is pure intelligence differentiated into individuality. As pure intelligence, it is infinite responsiveness and susceptibility. As devoid of relation to time and space, it is devoid of individual personality. It is therefore, in this aspect, a purely impersonal element upon which, by reason of its inherent intelligence and susceptibility, we can impress any recognition of personality that we will. These are the great facts that the mental scientist works with, and the student will do well to ponder deeply on their significance and on the responsibilities which their realization must necessarily carry with it. And this concludes the end of chapter 3. Well, my dear one, this was a doozy of a chapter. Well, I pondered on this because I am still very pleased that the author really pointed out that all of this is important for people to think and not have others think for them. So you can imagine I went to my thinking chair and I started thinking about some of the words here. And very brief, I loved how he mentioned all producing spiritual substance is limitless. So sometimes now I was thinking, so where does the fear of lack come from? Was this programmed into us? How did we forget? How did we forget that we are part of this limitless, infinite, producing spiritual substance? And I also like the very clear and mathematical / scientific approach. And you will see where I'm going with this. Where he says, the infinite must be a unit. You cannot have two infinites. So that was like, that's very logical. And then I said, well, doesn't that sound like God? In Revelation, God says, I am the Alpha and Omega, who is, was, and is to come. It's like it's this just big blob of infinite energy. Well, I don't want to call God a blob, but you know what I mean. Just this his mass of energy. So going back, he says on there, unity can neither be multiplied nor divided because it is a single unit, whereas it is at all the whole of it must be. So you just can't say, well, it's over here. It's everywhere. And I also loved his emphasis by saying the student needs to do the work. So my part of the work for me is to share this material with you. There's that saying, for those who have ears will hear. And so I want to do my part to share, and then I also want to do my part, which is to do the pondering, to do the thinking, and to begin to demonstrate God in me. Okay, so there was another little area that I want to share before I close this out. He went on to say, pure spirit subsists in the absolute, whether corporeal body or not, and from it all the phenomena of being flow, whether mental or physical. Therefore, in proportion to our increasing recognition of it, our power of producing outward visible results by the action of our thoughts will grow. So that was kind of going back to that law of attraction, what you focus on. And when you begin to realize that this is within you, and that the more that you begin to build in your mind and in your heart through your emotions the desire, then This will go back to this little part in the last sentence, paragraph of chapter 3, where Mr. Troward mentions it is purely impersonal. So if you're thinking fear-based thoughts, or if you're thinking positive and abundance thoughts, it is impersonal. That's why he wrote on here where he says that the responsibility is upon you, me, as we realize what this significance really means. So then it is your responsibility to watch your thoughts. It is my responsibility to watch my thoughts. And that is if you and I are one and we agree that through our healthy, abundant, positive thinking, we can make a difference. Why not try that? Do you think that it is worth to try? Well, if that's true, then join me onward to chapter 4.